Go get us a bottle of wine and meet me in the bedroom in 10 minutes.
Cassie!
The film starts with Brian and Cassie, a couple who are trying to fix their relationship after Cassie cheated on him. They go to Italy for a vacation to try and make things better. They get lost when their taxi driver takes them to a very old mansion. They keep driving and soon arrives at the location. That night, Brian and Cassie tried to have a nice, romantic time, enjoying the scenery. But even as they tried to connect, they couldn't shake off the painful memories that kept intruding on their efforts. Brian went upstairs to retrieve Cassie's phone, only to hear it ringing. It was her man calling. Brian felt sad again because he thought he already blocked him. Cassie invites him to join in the pool, but Brian didn't want to. He was still haunted by the memory of her betrayal. Later, Brian tried to be close to Cassie and wanted to be intimate, but she said no. So, Brian went into the living room to do something for himself, but he didn't know that someone was watching him with a secret camera. It turns out that the whole house had secret cameras everywhere. The next morning, Cassie made breakfast and went for a run. While she was running, she kept thinking about the bad thing she did. She couldn't focus and tripped, hurting her leg, until she saw a car and tries to stop it. The driver was a nice Italian man named Federico who lived in a house next door. He helped Cassie fix her leg and drove her back home. Cassie offered him coffee, but he politely declined and left. But a few minutes later, he came back and asked if he could come inside. Cassie agreed, and they chatted for a while. Brian spots a stranger in their house and feels uneasy. He starts to question Cassie's loyalty. Federico, with a charming smile, mentioned a picturesque town just a kilometer away, suggesting a leisurely stroll. Brian, however, declined, mentioning other plans. While Cassie enjoys a relaxing shower, Brian ponders a big question: should he ask Cassie to marry him? Moments later, Brian decided to reconcile with Cassie. They kissed, turning into physical activity, and they are enjoying the moment, but Brian kept seeing Cassie's betrayal in his mind, and it ruined their romantic mood. Unbeknownst to them, the creepy guy was watching them on secret cameras in the house. It turns out that the creepy guy was Federico, who lived nearby. Later, Federico drove Cassie and Brian into town so they could go for a walk and relax. When they got to town, Brian thanked Federico for helping them, but he was still jealous. He reminded Cassie about the bad thing she did and said he knew about her secret boyfriend calling her. They argued a lot, and Cassie decided to go home. Near the ATM, she bumped into Federico, who felt a little excited because he accidentally touched her. Brian went to a bar to have a drink and relax. Federico showed up and offered to be friends. Cassie was bored at home and decided to drink some expensive wine she found in the basement. Brian told Federico about why he was jealous. He said that Cassie cheated on him with a guy from work, and he couldn't forgive her. He came to Italy hoping to fix their relationship, but he was still upset. Federico noticed that Brian was looking at two pretty Italian women, so he offered to introduce them. The women, Alessandra and Isabella, were interested in Brian and agreed to have drinks with him. Brian felt guilty, but he had drunk too much and couldn't say no. Federico suggested playing a game called Two Truths and a Lie. He told 3 things about himself, and one of them was a lie. He said he had keys to Brian and Cassie's house and could visit Cassie whenever he wanted. That night, Federico carried out his plan. He snuck into the house, silently entering Cassie's bedroom. He touched her, causing her to believe it was Brian. Unbeknownst to her, this psycho had invaded her sanctuary. Her excitement grew as she touched Federico's fingers, unknowingly fueling his own passion, for he had fallen deeply in love with her. Brian woke up in a motel room, realizing he'd made a terrible mistake. He'd lost his phone and rushed home, keeping his night's escapades a secret. While showering, he noticed lipstick marks on his body, hoping Cassie wouldn't notice. Remembering Federico's claim about having keys to their house, Brian questioned Cassie about any visitors they might have had, but she couldn't remember a single one. Their fight escalated from unfounded jealousy, and Brian left for a walk. Cassie went to shower, unaware of Federico's watchful eye. Brian went to Federico's house, only to find it abandoned. He realized Federico had been lying all along, and his true identity was a mystery, sending Brian rushing back home in fear. Meanwhile, Federico visited Cassie, offering her a rabbit he'd hunted. Back at his own house, Brian realized Federico's intentions and tried to get him to leave. Federico refused, blackmailing Brian by threatening to tell Cassie about his night with the two women. Fearing exposure, Brian agreed to stay silent and endure Federico's unwanted presence. The conversation became tense, with Federico's words unsettling both Brian and Cassie. Cassie went to the kitchen, and Brian tried to get Federico to leave, threatening to call the police. Once Federico was gone, Cassie admitted she was scared of him, validating Brian's fears. Brian called the homeowner to report the suspicious man. Meanwhile, Federico returned to his hideout, watching the couple through security cameras. Brian decided to be honest with Cassie, admitting he'd been drinking at a bar and met two women. He couldn't remember cheating, and Cassie forgave him, offering to build their relationship on trust. She then went to shower and asked Brian to wait for her in the bedroom. Brian went to the basement for wine, but the door slammed shut, not by accident. He screamed, but Cassie couldn't hear him over the loud music Federico had turned on. Cassie heard a romantic song and went to the bedroom, finding a gift of lingerie and an eye patch. Thinking it was a romantic surprise from Brian, she put on the lingerie and blindfolded herself. Federico took advantage of her blindness and kissed her, enjoying the scenario. Meanwhile, Brian stumbled upon a secret doorway, leading him into a hidden passage beneath the house. He navigated the maze and escaped. Federico heard a sound from the kitchen and knew Brian had escaped. He disappeared in a flash. Cassie took off her blindfold and found Brian's phone with missed messages. She watched the videos and realized he'd cheated on her with the Italian women. Meanwhile, Brian saw the bedroom footage on the screen, assuming Cassie had cheated on him with Federico. Federico watched the couple suffering, hoping they would break up. His plan worked as they accused each other of betrayal. Cassie threw Brian's phone, breaking a mirror. They noticed a hidden camera and realized Federico had been watching them all along. Brian called the police, and Federico rushed back to the house to stop him. A fight broke out when Federico attacked Brian with a hunting knife. Federico was stronger and tried to strangle Brian, but Cassie intervened. She grabbed a cane and hit Federico, knocking him unconscious. In a fit of rage, Cassie continued to beat him, ultimately killing him. A car pulled up, and the couple quickly hid the body. Eduardo, the homeowner, arrived, responding to Brian's call. They told him everything was fine, but Eduardo decided to investigate. He soon realized that he and Federico were accomplices, using cameras to spy on couples and blackmail them. Eduardo walked to the security room to watch the tapes. He was stunned to discover that Brian and Cassie had murdered Federico. Furious, he stormed back to face them. While Cassie tried to distract Eduardo, Brian grabbed a cane and attempted to attack. But Eduardo was too swift and whirled around, bringing out his revolver. Brian attempted to explain that he had acted in self-defense, but Eduardo was not convinced. He was determined to protect his accomplice. Before he can shoot Brian, Cassie stabs him in the back. Brian took Eduardo's gun and shot him. The couple soon finds out a secret room with lots of monitors showing hidden cameras. They got rid of all the proof, smashing the computers and hiding the bodies. Then they took a bath and promised to never tell anyone what happened. After everything they went through, they felt closer than ever. But what they didn't know was that a little dwarf statue had a secret camera, and it was showing everything to lots of people online.